Okay, so it is time to start our webinar. This time we have a very special guest, Richard Griffiths. He's not only a very interesting person, expert, a true expert in cross-cultural management, but also a long friend of X-Cultures. So we have participated in a number of events together. Richard was one of the keynote speakers at a recent event in Miami when we had the X-Culture Symposium, and we've been intersecting in many other on many other occasions. So, but today we will not be asking him to educate us or share his insights about international business with us. Today he's here as the executive director. Is that the correct title?
That's correct, yes.
Of the Institute for Cross-Cultural Management. This organization is one of the clients, partners this semester with X-Culture. And so they presented a challenge, a very interesting one. And so today the goal of this meeting is to learn more about the organization, about its history, about its products and services, and then also talk a little bit more about the X-Culture challenge that the company presented to you, to students, so that you guys know a little bit more about the organization and what you need to do to provide reports that have value for the company. And so I think we will start with a short, I don't want to call it a presentation, but overview of what the company does, how it operates, how it fits with the structure of the FIT, Florida Institute of Technology, and then we'll just go into questions and answers.
Thank you very much, Vas.
All right.
So thank all of you first and foremost for putting your energy into this particular project. I can't tell you how much we appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you. Perhaps I could start with a little bit of background. So my background in terms of my education is that I'm an industrial organizational psychologist. So what we do is we help organizations make sure they're hiring the right people, that those people are trained and have the correct skills to be able to contribute to the workplace, and that essentially we keep them happy and engaged so we can retain our talent. So I started at Florida Tech 21 years ago. I ended up graduating from the University of Akron, and I started, I defended my dissertation on a Friday, and on Monday I was the program chair of a new PhD program in IO psychology. And that very first year I had a cultural psychologist come to me and say, this thing you're doing with IO is very interesting. Have you ever thought about looking at it from a global perspective? And I thought it was brilliant in that in 1997, the internet is coming online. We're still using dial-up modems, but you could already see that business was becoming more and more international. But my discipline was firmly rooted in research that had been conducted in the United States. And I thought if we were going to remain relevant in the world, that we needed to internationalize. So we started our internationalization efforts almost immediately. I actually remained chair until 2009 when I stepped down to found the Institute for Cross-Cultural Management, which was an applied research institute at the Florida Institute of Technology. So it's about 10 years old now. I'll give you just a little idea of what we do in ICCM. So there's sort of two sides to the house of ICCM. On one side, what we do is large-scale funded research. And in this case, our customer, if you will, is often the U.S. government or it's governments of other nations that are interested in learning more about how culture is affecting their performance and their overall organizational effectiveness. So we end up studying things like cross-cultural competence, how to train it, how to measure it, how to make sure that leaders have a global perspective, how to prepare expatriates and make sure that we're taking care of repatriates when they come back in. And we're conducting research in that area to learn the basics. What we do then, and this is probably the side of the house you're most interested in, is our business side of the house. We take everything that we've learned, and for a lack of a better term, we productize it, and we're able to push that out to our corporate partners who may have challenges as they are starting to work across international lines. So some of the challenges they may have, if you're an executive and you've put together the strategy for your company and that strategy has worked very well in the United States, it's not plug and play. You may need to adapt your strategy when you're working with another country. Or the strategy may be fine, but the way that it translates into operations or in day-to-day behavior may need to be altered to be able to achieve a particular strategy. So we work with executives to try to give them what is a global perspective. And then we offer services such as assessment to make sure that if you're going to send someone overseas, that they have the right competencies for that. And not just technical competencies, but interpersonal competencies. So we use a variety of measures that would kick out reports that a manager could look at that would help them make decisions in terms of who they might want to send overseas. A big part of our business is training. So we do training in the area of cross-cultural competence, and we've got a number of clients that we work with, most of them in the corporate sector, but some in nonprofit sector as well. And then we use a variety of sort of technology-enabled solutions. This is an area we're particularly interested in growing because they're scalable. Training is an interesting business, but profit margins are low. Takes a lot of labor in the area of training. So we're doing about $2 million a year in business now. And I would say that we have hit an area where we're no longer a startup, that we have a considerable amount of structure at this period of time. We have a lot of standardized processes and standard operating procedures that we're able to follow. And we have people that are sort of tracking all of the business processes at this stage. And we've hit this level of stability now for what I would say is a year to 18 months. And we're starting to prepare the organization for what I think is another opportunity for growth in some of the key areas that we are working in, and with some of the sort of customers that are groundbreaking customers. So that's a little bit about the history of AICCM and some of the products that we have. In terms of the market, Voss, is there a question?
Well, there are a few questions, but you kind of moved into market. So there was a question, can you give examples of who your clients are and what kind of services or questions they were asking?
Fantastic. So I mentioned the military customers, and I think I'm going to set them aside for now because it's a different type of business in terms of putting together government proposals. But let's talk about the corporate side of the house. We are in Melbourne, Florida, and the area that we're in has a local market, and these typically are high-tech firms that are international organizations. So you've got Rockwell Collins and you have Northrop Grumman, and they often are putting together communication systems or avionics. We're also in the Space Coast, so we have X-Culture here, we have Blue Origins here as well. They typically are going to be interested in the assessment components and training to make sure that those individuals are ready when they're working abroad. Perhaps our biggest customer right now is the Orlando International Airport. They retained us to help them build what is a brand new terminal. It's a $3 billion project. We will be working with them over the next 15 years to help them achieve the number one, their goal of being the number one international airport in the world. And in that sense, we actually used culture to help define the hard structures, to help them tailor their strategy. And now we're moving into a phase where we're going to train about 28,000 people in cross-cultural competence, but we have to build their entire talent management system around cultural competence and customer service. So those are sort of the types of clients that we have. We also have a smaller number of clients that are coming from outside of the United States that want to do business in the United States. So when we first started it, I thought we would be working mostly with US companies that were thinking about going abroad. But we actually have been approached by many companies that, for instance, we have a company that is in Osaka, Japan. They have a subsidiary here in the United States, and they wanted to try to figure out what is United States culture like. So that's an area where we think there is some growth.
So this airport project, that sounds very, very interesting. Can you specify what exactly you do for them? So you did mention training of the personnel. I assume yes. It would be some sort of a cultural awareness, cultural sensitivity training. What else does that entail? Because it sounds like a very big, ambitious project.
It is a huge project. So so a couple of things that we've done to date, we really needed to clarify the goals of the airport and try to help them frame them appropriately. So they had the sense that, and some data supported it, that the international market was growing relatively quickly. It was driving a lot of revenue, and they knew culture could be an issue. So they knew they needed something, but not quite what that was. So we worked with the executives to frame that, and the real issue is about customer experience. So the way we framed this is we want the customer experience to be awesome for everyone, no matter where they come from. So a lot of the work that we did was a gap analysis to see where are they with their customer experience and where are they on key drivers of customer experience. So one of the things we saw is that they need to be able to improve their levels of engagement, employee engagement. They are a very hierarchical, siloed culture, and they need to be doing more knowledge management and knowledge sharing because those things drive customer experience. So we built a number of initiatives around that in terms of assessing where they're at and now rolling out what are initiatives to try to improve those types of things. So what we see is that broadly, I would say they fall in the human capital area, but not all of it. We've really got into some of marketing assessment as well in terms of being able to use artificially intelligent methods to scrape web data to give them a better idea of where they are at with their customer experience. So I think ICCM is not only prepared for growth in business, but also a growth in terms of the services that we can offer, because the airport project is so new that there's no playbook for it. And the solutions they need don't exist. So we are in constant problem solving mode, and we're just cranking out innovation after innovation because of this. So we think that it's expanding our capabilities, which ultimately could expand our business.
Yeah, some things you described, it almost seems to me that 10, 15 years ago, it was not, people didn't even ask those questions, didn't even know that those questions will be challenges. And now all of a sudden you have to come up with solutions. Yeah,
I would agree.
So we have received a bunch of questions, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to try to group them by the questions in the challenge. And so this way, hopefully we will proceed in a more logical order.
Fantastic.
So Brian, for example, here I see Daniela, I see your questions. I'll just ask them when they, kind of make more sense as far as the topics. And so let's talk a little bit about the market in itself. So if you had to do a market analysis, who would you say are your main competitors, and how do you compare it to that competition in terms of your strengths, weaknesses? What are the opportunities and threats you see for your organization?
Okay, very good question. So I'll start it by talking about the types of competitors that we have, and then I can give you some specifics about those companies. So there's typically two types of individuals that are in the field that we would look at as competitors. One, you'll get executives who are very experienced, and they have been abroad many, many times, and they will form a company around sort of cultural training and cultural interventions, but it's based on their experience. So that's one type. And then what you'll find are some academics that are experts in cultural research, and sometimes they band together in a consortium, and they will offer services as well. And maybe I'll just take 1 second here to talk about what is our differentiator. And that differentiator is that we are actually both of those people. So while we are experts in science, and we'll talk about our third eye process and how we use that, we've all lived and worked abroad. We've all worked in business so that we can take off our science hat and have conversations with business people. So we feel we're firmly in both of those worlds, and we can translate and better understand businesses and be able to integrate science so that we have evidence-based programs. The actual companies that I would say, although they're not necessarily competitors, many times partners, there's an organization called AICCM Global. They have a solution called GlobeSmart, which is a fantastic tool. We often partner with them. There's a group called the COSI Group, which is on the West Coast, and they do some assessment and cultural training as well. Most of the people in the cultural space are small businesses. You'll find maybe one or two consultants might band together, or they are, just solo practitioners that are doing this work. They often belong to an organization called CTAR, which is a band of cultural trainers. The big consulting firms haven't got into this space too much yet, but if you see it, it will be KPMG. Often that was driven by Fons Trompenaars, who's now spun back out to his original company. He bought out. KPMG bought him. He bought his company back from them. He does this about every 10 years. I think that's how he makes his money. So those are some of the competitors that we have in the space. Someone
just asked to clarify or spell one more time the name of the Association of Professional Cross-Cultural Consultants. CTAR, you said?
It's CTAR, SIETAR. Yeah. There is a U.S.-based organization, and then there are several around the world. They hold annual conferences for these cultural trainers.
Yeah. And Experian and COSI, I actually took their training, so they also do a lot of cross-cultural assessment, certifications, and things like that. So, interesting thing. Yeah, absolutely. So then, comparing you to the competition, it actually seems like, minus COSI and Experian, you would call yourself a big organization in this space, right? As you said, most of the consulting is done either by individual practitioners or professors who do it on the side. So you have a sizable organization with about a dozen people or something like that on your payroll?
It would be between 25 and 30, depending on.
I didn't realize you're that big. Yeah, I've met many of them, and I thought there would be basically that's it, but it seems like there are many more. So that's quite.
Yeah. It's somewhat of a unique organization in that we are part of a university, which is a not-for-profit organization, but we run ICCM as a for-profit in terms of our mental framework. In terms of our IRS processes, that's a whole nother issue that we have to deal with. And then the other, it's an interesting challenge, but I think one that we love is that the vast majority of the people working at ICCM are master's and PhD students. So one challenge is that we have at 25% turnover every year, and it's always our best experience. But we love that because then the family grows and they're going out into other organizations. But that means we have to do a lot of training. We have to keep people up to speed all the time. The upside of that is that we have the freshest ideas you could possibly have, and people that are not afraid to try things. So it really keeps us in a nice innovation space.
And I also assume for them, they're very strongly intrinsically motivated. So that's what they would like to basically become experts in. So for them, that's an opportunity to gain experience, to learn new things. So it's a whole different type of mindset. I assume many of them do it not because of the money, but because of just trying to get into the profession, right?
Absolutely. And, we do annual engagement surveys, and our engagement levels couldn't be higher. I mean, one of the things I actually have to do is I have to slow my people down so they don't burn out because they just will go 100 miles an hour. So we've been trying to instill these work-life balance norms so that we can keep everybody happy and healthy as well as being successful.
Right. So now a bunch of questions related to marketing. So how do you promote your organization this time? What kind of channels do you use? Is it some sort of direct mail? Do the customers come to you? Do you actually actively advertise? And then what is your main message and what kind of promotional materials do you use?
Okay. So I can speak to our marketing efforts sort of historically and then where we are now. So being an academic program and being a bunch of psychologists, the first thing we realized right off the bat is we didn't know anything about marketing. So, I had a little bit of budget when the organization started, and we brought in a marketing consultant, and he actually helped us with two key pieces of messaging that we use. So, I haven't used it yet, but if you hear me say, what does ICCM do? We help organizations adapt, prepare, and prosper for the global environment. And that sort of adapt, prepare, prosper tag took us a year to get to. Because he sort of just asked a million questions about what we did, and he was able to tie that together. The other thing that he helped us with was what is, we think, our key differentiator and a proprietary process that we call the third eye process. And I can provide you with that materials if you want to share that with your team, boss.
Sure.
The general idea behind it is that everything we do is steeped in science. So we investigate first. Anytime a customer comes to us, we want to understand what does the science say. But we're not eggheads. We're not ivory tower academics. So we all have lived and worked abroad. We all have been in business. So, we're able to match up with our business folks. And then the way that we approach it is different than the other groups. If you see most cultural trainers or cultural organizations, they overload you with information. Yeah. So many of you have the book Kiss, Bow, or Shake Hands, and it's a chapter for each country. But you can't remember that stuff when you are in the country. And if you are trying to, you can't remain genuine. So we work very much on scaffolding process to build people up to where they have the knowledge. They use this in exercises. We give them a lot of feedback so that it becomes internalized and they're able to see it when it's coming. So those were two pieces of marketing that we were able to establish early on. In terms of the channels that we use, I'd say we primarily are promoting through social media methods and speaking engagements. So the vast majority of our business comes when I'm out speaking or ICCM members are speaking and people come up and are curious, and that starts the conversation, and then we start to work them down the business development pipeline.
Right. And actually I have seen for the students, so I have seen Rich speak, and he's probably the most effective speaker I've ever seen. It's a very interesting combination of, how should I put it, being engaging and entertaining while actually saying something of substance. Because what you usually see in this space, like for example, when you see presentations or seminars, let's say Tony Robbins, I mean, arguably the most known brand and man in the coaching business. When he speaks, it's a lot of fun, but when you try to think about what he actually said, it's just basically a list of some sort of slogans. I mean, there is really not much it's not really based much on research or things like this. So here you have someone who actually has a terminal degree in psychology and cross-cultural management, so someone who does a lot of research in this area. So when Rich talks about these things, you actually know that there is a substance behind those words. It's not just simply, nice sounding sentences. It is actually based on research. And so at the same time, as I said, sometimes when very smart people talk, people fall asleep. And here you manage to do it in a way that students actually smile and, get engaged. So I can see how that gives you some, I don't know if you want to call it business, but I can see how after a presentation like this, people think, oh, maybe I would like to hire this guy to do some work for my organization, maybe some training for my employees. So, all right. One more question that we forgot to ask, market. So currently, as I understand, most of your clients are in the United States, but are you open to offering your services to clients outside the United States? And if so, have you already done it? What specific markets you're most interested in? Any restrictions, maybe markets that you're not interested in at all? Please, if you can comment on that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. In general, I would say now the majority of our clients are in the United States, but we've had clients that have been international clients before, and that's an area that we would like to grow. In terms of probably strengths, one of the things that we're lucky with at Florida Tech is that's a very international university. About 30% of the students here come from up to 120 countries a year, somewhere between 110, 120 countries a year. So it gives us a lot of local cultural knowledge and language capacity that we're able to use when we're working with our international partners. One particular area that we're interested in expanding internationally is our, let's call it transportation hub business. So the business we're doing with the airport. Orlando International Airport is the first airport in the world to take a look at this cultural phenomenon. And what we think is that that's a part of the business that we can grow. And if you start to think about, particularly, let's just think about Europe and Asia, it's not just airports. I would say you take a look at their rail travel. Train stations there are wonderful, and they're just as vibrant as every airport. So there's business that we could build in what would be the transportation hub. And we would love to do that. We're in current conversations now with Vienna Airport in Austria. They've got quite a bit of interest in what we're doing. So I would say the areas where we have most of our relationships are going to be in Europe and in East Asia. I have good contacts and good local networks in South America and in Africa, but we're not doing a lot of business in those places now.
So jumping to the last question that I was going to ask later, but I think now is a good time. So you mentioned airports, and
yes.
So would it be advisable, would it be acceptable, appropriate? Let's say we have a student who lives, I don't know, in Frankfurt, Germany, so which would you actually have a few students there. And so there is a big airport there. And let's say they don't know how that airport operates. Do they do any cross-cultural, assessment? And do they try to cater to passengers from other cultures, countries? Would it be appropriate for the students to try to schedule a meeting with the airport manager, or I'm not sure what the structure is, to interview them and see how they approach this issue altogether? If they work with anyone, and then perhaps even inquire what would it take for them to hire a company like yours to provide that sort of a service. So do you think it would be, as I said, advisable or appropriate? Would it be informative for the students to conduct an interview like that to better understand the market?
Yeah, I think that would be a really nice opportunity for the student. As always, trying to get executives' times can be tricky. So it's going to have to be a situation where you probably have a contact through your family or through, be a fantastic opportunity for the student to go in and do these types of needs analysis or just general informational interview. I'd be very interested to hear what they find out.
Yeah, I know based on my experience from the previous years when we did X-Culture, most students try not to conduct interviews like this. They find it a little too, time-consuming, scary, intimidating. Yeah. But those who do, they actually provide some of the most interesting reports, because one thing when you're guessing what would be a good way to approach a customer, one thing when you're trying to guess what kind of message would resonate with them, how they make decisions, and a whole different thing is when you actually spoke to a potential client and heard firsthand, what's going on in their head. And another thing that I noticed, again, most of the students, and here kind of sort of like a career development tip, In most cases, when you will be applying for jobs, it's not so much about what you know, it's about whom you know.
Yes.
And it is true that for students, it's usually very hard to meet in person CEOs, for example, of companies. I mean, how do you approach them? What do you tell them? Well, here you have a good opportunity, you have a good reason to approach them. You say, I'm a student at XYZ University, I'm working in this project, and I'm doing research, including on your industry. Would you spare a few minutes for me so I can better understand your business? It's a legitimate, reasonable request, and in my experience, most of the managers respond, and that's not the type of request they get frequently. And so they get intrigued. They would like to meet you. They would like to hear a little bit more. Maybe they want to hear from you about the results of your study. So this is a unique opportunity for you to actually, reach out to one of those executives and schedule a meeting. And then you never know where it goes. We've had cases when that led to a job offer in the end. So if you would like to meet people in power, I mean, the worst that can happen, you'll just not get any response, or they will say, sorry, I'm too busy. Big deal. You have lost 5 minutes and you are where you were 5 minutes ago. But you may get a response. You may get that meeting. You may learn new things. You may know someone now or meet someone who may advise you, who may even offer you a job. So I strongly encourage you to do that. It will make a huge difference in the quality of your work. Now, Brian, you asked a few questions, and I really like them. I added you as one of the panelists. If you would like to unmute your microphone and maybe ask a question, I especially like the one that you asked about the way these kinds of services are charged for, pricing, and I suppose that. So if you would like to maybe ask it yourself, go ahead, please.
Hi, this is Bayan. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, it's Bayan. Sorry, I saw Brian. Sorry, my mental model in my head. Yes, please go ahead, Bayan. So sorry.
Hi, no worries. I just wanted to know about the optimal way to charge for services offered by the SSM. Should it be like a fixed price, or the price is negotiated each time?
That's a very good question.
Yeah, that is a really good question. And what you're going to find in the consulting field is that you've got quite a bit of flexibility in your pricing structure. So it often depends on who you're marketing to. Generally, the penetration strategy that I prefer is to have penetration at the executive level. The primary reason is that if I can connect at the C level, they're able to push the solution through the organization because they have more power in the organization. Traditionally, talent management consultants, their penetration is usually through human resources, and human resources has less pull at the executive table than someone who's a COO or a CEO. When you're working at the executive level, price is usually not an issue. What they want is a solution, and they want quality. So if you're able to demonstrate your capacity, you can charge at what we often refer to as at the Cadillac pricing structure. So we do price probably higher than most consultants would, and definitely higher than most academics, because we're extremely customer focused. What we make sure is that whatever that we give the customer is going to not only meet their expectations, but exceed their expectations. We really work hard to blow their minds. And when we do that, what we find is that they don't even ask what we charge. They stop asking that question. They just start asking us to do things. So it's kind of difficult for me to give you a number, but if I were working with let's say I was working at the executive level with what we call, an elite brand. We could charge anywhere. On the very low end, it could be $250 an hour. On the high end, it could be $1,000 an hour. And that would be something that they wouldn't even think twice about. So it's usually billed per hour.
So that's the question. So it's billed per hour, or is it a total contract number, or is it some sort of like a monthly subscription, or how does it work?
It's usually a little bit of both. So they would like to see it broken down into subtasks, but they would say, we would like you to tackle X project. We would work with them to scope it out, and we would come back with a proposal that might say, okay, this is going to be about $600,000. Here's the breakdown of why it's $600,000. And we might go down to what is a reasonable subtask level, so that they could see where their money was going. Any proposal I have has a section in it that talks about partnering on price. And the first thing I tell people is we never let price getting in the way of having a good partnership. Because given the fact that we pick a premium pricing strategy, it gives us a lot of negotiation room. And I would rather be able to get in with a good brand, not so much foot in the door because I don't want to lowball, then I'm stuck at that low price. But I can bring it back. I'd rather have them gasp at the price first, and I can dial it back a little bit. But I want them to gasp. I want them to actually have a little sticker shock. That's been our strategy. I don't know if that's a good strategy, or not, but that has been our strategy to date. So we do tend to price on the higher end, but because of that, we make sure we deliver exceedingly good customer service.
Right. I'm not sure if now is appropriate time to talk about that, but I would like to spend 1 minute to talk about the pricing, especially in this industry. So for you students to kind of know. So there are two different types of products, or economists talk about two different types of products. One would be something like gasoline, or bread, or I don't know, clothing that you buy all the time, and you sort of know how much it should cost. You know that, a liter of gas should be about $1, or, a t-shirt should be about, $10, something like that. And so in those cases, you know what the price should be, and then if you find an unusually low price, you buy it because you know it's a good deal. But then occasionally you have products where people have no idea what they should cost, products that you may buy once in your lifetime, like, for example, consulting services, or maybe, hire a lawyer, or maybe buy some very unique product. And so what happens in those cases, they say, is that the clients try to predict the quality of the product. And if they're not familiar with the product, they don't really know what to look for. And so the only indicator of future quality is basically the price. And so what studies often show is that when consultants increase the fee, they actually see more business. Normally, the higher the price, the lower the demand. But in some types of sectors, it's the opposite. Because the client goes online and tries to look for potential clients. And he sees there is this consultant who charges $50 per hour, and there is this other one who charges $500 per hour. And so the client then thinks, well, I don't know, I think I can afford both, but the one who charges more must be good. And I have only this much time to solve the problem, so I can't really waste my money on some cheap solutions. So maybe I should go with the more expensive one, because presumably it offers me better quality. It will cost more, but hopefully it offers better quality. And so yes, in industries like this, sometimes lowering your price will actually lead to fewer customers. So surprisingly, but it does happen. Research shows that it does happen.
Yes.
All right, so we have a few more minutes left. So what I would like to do now is go one more time through the questions that we have in the challenges, and maybe ask for your clarification what you expect from those answers. So industry and competition analysis. So I assume the students are expected to go out, find potential competitors, and then literally conduct some research and see how your company compares to the competition, both in terms of the price, types of services they offer, maybe the types of brand they have, maybe some other things, and literally give you a bullet list of, let's say, strengths and weaknesses, and maybe threats and opportunities. Is that what you expect, or would you like them to do something different here?
I think that will be a very valuable thing to be able to do. So you're looking at this through what would be the competitor lens. Mm-hmm. And look at differentiators. What are they offering that we don't? You may look at price structure. You may look at different characteristics of the organization. One of the things I would say at this time, cultural consulting services, there is a lot of room in the field. So there's not what I would call a highly competitive environment right now. And because of that, what we actually look for are partnering opportunities.
Right.
So, as well as looking at these folks through a competitor lens, you may want to actually take a look at them and say, who has services and products that might complement what we're doing? Who has philosophies that are aligned with AICCM? Or where do you see potential fruitful partnerships? And how do you think we might want to approach these people? Because at this stage, I think our philosophy is that we don't want to fight over one pie. We want to grow the pie. And I think now we're quite interested in partnering. So looking at it through both of those lenses, view them as competitors, but also as potential partners to be able to grow the business.
Exactly, yeah. Then market analysis. So again, I suppose the question is, do a survey of the market and try to identify regions in the United States or countries outside the United States where the demand for this sort of services from an American-based company could be high, and maybe competition is low. And so I assume it would be also advisable to perhaps talk to potential clients to see if they really would be interested in that service. Just because you think there may be a market, it may not be the case once you start talking to those potential customers. And so the idea is, I understand here, go do your research, talk to people, conduct your survey, and then bring suggestions for the best, most promising markets, and explain why you think there may be business there. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say that that's the case. And you guys are all very smart business students, so you know this, but I'll give you just a little bit of insight. When I go out and I actually talk to businesses about the challenges they're facing, I never talk about culture to open the conversation. I'm really always talking about international business, and I talk about risk, I talk about time, I talk about costs. And what I start to identify are where are situations where a budget, a project might have had a cost overrun, international project, and I might dive in and talk about why. And they'll say, oh, we can't understand it. The communication is really awful with these people, and they don't seem to understand what a deadline is. And then you take a look and say, oh, okay, well, it's Latin America. The perception of time may be different here. And you can introduce the concept of culture. So as you are, looking at what are particular segments where, they may have a need for our services, or as you're looking at different international markets, think about how you frame the conversation to look at international business, perhaps through what are their terms, not necessarily culture. A lot of times when you bring up culture, unless it's someone who's been burned by, culture in the past, they think about it as a very soft element. They don't think about it as a hard business metric. And so, when you're thinking about segment, that would be my advice, to think about the horror stories that you hear in international business, and then try to see how culture might have led to that, rather than opening up your conversation with culture.
Right. And so then when it comes to the marketing section, again, the idea is that the students will identify first potential clients, and then they will think about, so what's the best way to reach them? What's the best communication channel? Would we place some ads on Facebook, for example, or would it be better to go with direct mail or maybe some other form, right? And then so they would probably, I assume it would be more valuable if they not only just said advertise on social media, but actually provided some sort of a strategy, identified the specific perhaps platforms where the ads should be placed, maybe even did some calculations how much they should cost, maybe even provided some suggestions for how frequently they should run, what that ad might look like, and obviously explain why, for example, let's say Facebook and not YouTube, or why direct mail and not, for example, direct calling and things like that, right? So as many details as possible.
Absolutely. And I would say of the needs that I'm looking in the X Culture Challenge, this is probably the one that is most acute for us. And I could give you an example of where this comes into play. So one of our primary products, if you want to think about that way, is a event that we hold every 2 years called the Cross-Cultural Management Summit. And in the summit, our concept was to pull people who were not only experts in culture, but a broad, very diverse audience that all were thinking about this particular issue, so they could come together and share ideas. I think the event offers a tremendous amount of value, and the experience that we, when we're measuring the experience of the attendees, we're getting just rave reviews on the experience. However, an event where we really wanted to put about 200 butts in seats, we're putting about 100 butts in seats. And so we are a little stumped in terms of, what are the promotion channels? How do we get How do we get in front of the right people, and what's the message so that they see value, so that they would, they prepare, they think about that next summit a couple of years down the line, and they're putting that in their calendar. So, if there's an illustration of where I think we are not doing a very good job in the marketing area through promotion channels and having the right message, and what is our entry mode, that's a really good example.
Yeah. Talking about the summit, it's one of those events, and I've attended it, I believe, twice. You go once, you never quit. It's so good that you never miss one in the future. The question is, how do you inform the potential participants about the event? It's not the type of event that you would advertise on TV for the broad audience. It's only for professionals in cross-cultural management. So how do you reach those people? How do you inform them? Because once they know, they will come, and they will keep coming back. So the question is, how do you get that initial contact with them? Then you also had a question on entry mode and partnerships. So you did mention that you're interested in advice. For example, let's say there is a different country somewhere where there is a market. So what's the best way to establish presence there? Would it be some sort of a partnership with a local partner, or maybe set up some sort of a subsidiary, or just advertise directly from the United States? So I assume here students should not only share their thoughts, but perhaps also provide literally names, contacts of potential partners, if that's what they advise. So again, as many details as possible. Is that correct?
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. In terms of, if you actually see someone who you think, and you're having conversations with them, and you think that they may be a potential partner, we're always open to having those conversations. But you hit it right on the head. Depending on where you're at, let's say I'm working in China, I'm not going to be able to just have some direct marketing and then get a customer in China. I need to have a third party that will make that introduction, and then I'm going to probably have to have a Chinese business partner, maybe even an academic, and then a government partner that could be coming from Ministry of Education or coming from the a local Communist Party member that would facilitate these conversations.
Exactly.
So depending on the area that you're doing your study in, having a better understanding of those the entry mode and who do I need to be working with to make that work would be fantastic. Any specifics about that, I would call that icing on the cake.
Yeah, exactly. And then we have a few questions about operations management, things like, for example, certifications. So I assume here students need to do a quick check and maybe a more in-depth research as to whether these sort of services have to be certified in that market, and if so, what would it take to get the certification? Probably doesn't have to be certified, I assume, in most countries, but again, it's just something that you need to check. Likewise, pricing. So we did talk about that, and so it seems like the standard model in the United States is billing by the hour, but again, if in the market that you identified as a promising market, a different model is more popular or acceptable, comment on that and provide suggestions for that. Maybe it would be something completely different. Maybe
Yes.
It's a fixed contract price, or maybe it's a subscription, or maybe some other form of payment.
Yeah.
So I assume here as many details and explanations why and how it would work, that would be appreciated, right?
Very much so. And I would say one of the things that you learn about ICCM very quickly is that we're open to ideas. We really don't follow the traditional footsteps of what you would consider. So as you're looking at marketing, your brain may actually sort of slip into business model.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of different ways to monetize services. And so for instance, I can give you an example of one. I have a colleague of mine, a long time ago, we actually thought about putting together programs that would help universities internationalize. And one of the things that you find is universities don't have a lot of spare money right now.
Right.
I have a colleague of mine who approached that business from a different perspective. And what they did, they went to the university and said, you should really be more international, but you can roll this into your first year experience classes, and we would sell those materials to the students. So now all of a sudden they distributed the cost of the program across what were many, many thousand students,
Right.
rather than centralize it with the university. And so as you're thinking about marketing, you may challenge what is our business model. And we love that. We love to be challenged. So if you see an opportunity to approach a business problem in a different way that has a different business structure, different business model, we love those kind of conversations.
Yeah, that's very important, yes, unconventional solutions. There is one more question from Bayan. She's asking if you may share some of the names, or if you would share some of the names of your customers so that the students can interview them, but I'm not sure how it would work with all the non-disclosure agreements and ethics.
Yeah.
Even like it doesn't sound reasonable to me here. I mean, it sounds reasonable, but probably It's not the way it's done in this industry, is it?
I would say that's a really great question, and it would be where I would start. I would want to have an idea of what value has ICCM brought. We have asked the customers to provide some of those statements, and we'd be happy to share those. I'd have to probably strip the names out,
Right.
for reasons that Voss has mentioned. And you'll find that many customers won't talk about this publicly because they see it as a competitive advantage.
Right.
They really wouldn't want their competitors to see this. But what we can do is, to a certain extent, cleanse the customer statements we have, and we'd be happy to share those.
Okay, yeah, all right. All right, so we're pretty much out of time. I would like to have a 15-minute break before we have the next webinar. The only thing is we have also here Professor Tim Muth. And so Tim is both sort of a liaison between XCulture and ICCM, but also a long-term XCulture professor and partner and mentor. So I'm not sure if, Tim, you would like to add anything, and I'm not sure if you're listening from your phone or if you are on a computer. So would you like to add anything? I'm not sure if you even have the sound. So Tim may be just hearing us but not able to talk so. But yes, I think we will stop here. So if you have any other questions, students, you can email them to us. And it used to be that we shared the direct contacts of our clients. But because there are so many of you, I mean, sometimes literally it may be, dozens and dozens of questions per day. So what we do is we ask you to send your questions to admin@xculture.org. and we have a database of frequently asked questions. So it's a lot of questions every day, but most of them are repetitive. And so there is no need for us to bother busy executives with the same question over and over again. So what we do is my assistant just simply finds the answer to the question if it had been asked before and just copies and pastes it, and you get the response right away. And so this way we contact the company only if there is a new question. It happens sometimes. But in any case, if you have any questions, email them to us. If we have the answer already, we will send it to you right away. If not, we will reach out to the company and then ask for that clarification, and we'll add it to the database. So anything else, you will be able to ask those questions. And maybe we will try to do one of these webinars later on in the semester. So we'll see if there is a need to get maybe intermediate feedback and ask more questions. But for now, you will have this recording.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And let's stop here. So we will be in touch then by email. Thank you so much.
Take care, boss. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Mm-hmm.